Good morning. I would like to welcome everyone. My name is David Dreyer with Tribune Publishing, and I'm pleased to be here with my Tribune colleagues, Tim Knight, who's our president and CEO, Trif Alatsis, who is the publisher and editor of the Baltimore Sun, and Rick Hutsul, who is the editor of the Capital Gazette. The saddest day for Tribune was obviously June 28th of 2018, when we got the very sad news that a gunman had charged into the newsroom of the Capital Gazette in Annapolis, Maryland, and killed 5 of our colleagues. That event, a year ago this Friday, was the single deadliest assault against journalists in U.S. history. And we need to recognize that journalists are the keepers of democracy. Journalists are the cornerstone of our republic. In fact, I argue that journalists are both an expression of, as well as a guardian of liberty, and that can't be forgotten. We know that journalists are under attack all across the globe. And the fact that over the last several years we've seen attacks take place here at home is something that has led to this moment. So as we mark this very sad, the first anniversary of the very sad and tragic events that took place in Annapolis last June 28th, it provided the inspiration that brought us here today. We are here to begin the process of implementing what, as my friend and colleague Barbara Cochran has reminded me, was little more than an idea 8 weeks ago. Little more than an idea 8 weeks ago. The first telephone call that I made was to my friend of 25 years, Don Graham. He called me back. I was walking down Wilshire Boulevard. He said, "What's all that noise there?" And I said, "I'm walking down the street, but I want to talk to you about something." And I raised this notion, and Don immediately said, "This has to be done. It's a very important priority." And then I found from talking to our staff that it was important for us to get legislation passed through the United States Congress, both houses of Congress, that will not provide any taxpayer funding, because we encourage people to go to fallenjournalist.org, which is our new website, but this will all be done through voluntary contributions. But for us to proceed with the work itself, it is essential that we get legislation through both houses of Congress. This is in no way a political statement. This is in no way a political statement. We want bipartisan support, Democrats and Republicans coming together to recognize something that is so vital. Yesterday morning, I did something that I hadn't done in a long time. I went charging up the steps of the Lincoln Memorial. And when I got there, I looked across the mall at all of the monuments there, the World War II monument. I looked down towards, obviously, the Vietnam Memorial, up at the Capitol, the Washington Monument. And I was standing at the feet of Abraham Lincoln, and I began to think about the fact that every single monument on that mall is there with ties to journalism. And then I began to thinking, and I went back and looked. In 1787 and 1788, the New York Independent Journal, Don, and the New York Packet were the 2 newspapers that carried 85 articles, op-eds that were written by Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison, known as the Federalist. And that was in 1787. And then I rushed forward to the Tribune and was reminded that in February of 1860, I'm particularly proud of this, the Chicago Tribune endorsed Abraham Lincoln for President of the United States. In that endorsement, it talked about Lincoln's honesty, his intellect, his firmness, and his patriotism. Those are the 4 points that are made. And I will say that I'm always inspired when I walk into the Chicago Tribune Tower. And it's like a cathedral, because there are all these great quotes inscribed on the wall. And to me, the most powerful one came from the lead author of the U.S. Constitution, James Madison, who said, "To the press alone, checkered as it is with abuses, the world is indebted for all the triumphs that have been gained by reason and humanity over error and oppression." That's from the author of the U.S. Constitution. And so we know how important this is. A bipartisan effort has been put together. Yesterday, H.R. 1969 was introduced in the House of Representatives by Congresswoman Grace Napolitano and my former colleague Tom Cole. And in the Senate, S. 3465 was introduced by my colleagues Ben Cardin and Rob Portman. And I would like to ask each of them to offer some remarks in support of their legislation, is what I assume it'll be.
Well, first let me
the great Clarence Page of the Chicago Tribune.
First, let me thank David Dreyer for his leadership on this issue. David was a dear colleague in the House of Representatives, always known for his integrity, always known for his just driven commitment towards democratic principles. So, David, thank you for taking this on, and we thank the Tribune for its help to make this a reality. It's certainly good to be here with Tom Cole. We worked together on many issues when I was in the House, and we're still working together on issues now that I'm in the Senate. I know that Rob Portman will be here. Rob and I have hooked up on a lot of really important issues, so it is great to partner with my friend Congressman Portman on introducing a bill for Fallen Journalists Memorial to be built here in Washington. I just really want to underscore the point that David made. On rough days, I look for a little bit of time off to sort of get my head together, and what I do is walk down the mall. And I'm inspired by the memorials that I see to those who served in World War I or World War II in Korea, who fought for democracy, to strengthen our country and to strengthen democratic institutions here in America and around the world. I see the memorials to our presidents who did incredible things to build this democratic state. So it inspires me and inspires many people who visit this city in order to visit and see the memorials that we have on the National Mall. It is not only a national treasure, it's an international treasure. But there's clearly missing a memorial to the fallen journalist. The freedom of press is the bedrock of our country. As David said, everything's sort of related to the freedom of the press, but we don't have a focal point where we can pay our respect for those that have literally given their life in the line of duty to protect the democracy of this nation. So I'm very proud to be part of this effort. The legislation, as David points out, allows this memorial to be built on federal land, but it will be done by private dollars. Barbara Cochran, thank you for your leadership in putting together those that will make that a reality. We pass the bill, and then we get the funds. There's been over 1,300 journalists who lost their lives in the last 25 years in the line of duty. This is a tough week for those of us that understand the risks and importance of journalism. I do remember visiting the Capitol Gazette a year ago, and it was a tough day, and it's been a tough year, and this is a tough week. We will never forget the 5 journalists who died on that day and what they did. And I will never forget the resiliency of the people at the Capitol Gazette to make sure that publications continued. The freedom of press is under attack around the world today. Make no mistake about it. Journalism is not a safe profession around the world, as we know journalists being imprisoned and killed because of their commitment to democracy. This memorial will give us a chance to redouble our efforts to understand how important the freedom of press is to our democratic system here in America and around the world. I am proud to be associated with all of you that are going to make this a reality. We're going to do our work in the Congress to pass the legislation. We'll support your efforts to raise the private funds. And then one day I'll have a chance to walk here in Washington and be inspired by the memorial to the fallen journalists. Congratulations.
My dear friend and colleague, Tom Cole.
You see, he grabbed me by the arm and shoved me up here. Somebody asked me why you're here, and I said, because my chairman told me to be here. And it's good to see you again, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on this. Ben has been a dear friend since I had the privilege of serving within the House. We're headed off to travel with our buddy Roy Blunt, I think the 1st of August, or excuse me, Steny Hoyer. Right, yeah, it's literally coming right up. You know, when I was asked to be, I spent most of my life in politics. Mostly as a political consultant, long before I was actually in office. So I've been in it and around it for about 40 years now. And all along the way, the most important thing has always been the relationship with the media, because that's how you tell your story, that's how you make your case. Much more important doing it day in and day out than it is in a 30-second spot or some sort of crafted message. And that dialogue back and forth between political figures and a free press is arguably the most important discussion that occurs in a democracy. It bothers me a lot when I see the press demeaned, quite frankly. We've seen quite a bit of that. And as if when you're telling a story, it's always from a partisan standpoint, or it's always got meant to manipulate. That's not my experience at all in dealing with most journalists. You know, in our business, we're not combat soldiers. We're not facing danger every day. But you do pause and think when you get up at a town hall meeting and you've had a colleague that's been brutally attacked at one of those things, or you do know when you walk into the United States Capitol that you are walking into a terrorist target that people literally tried to destroy on 9/11, and thank God brave Americans kept that from happening. And our friends in the press are there every step of the way too. And when they tell a story, they get the blame sometimes for a story. So to see people that believe in their profession, and that means believe in our democracy so profoundly that they will risk their lives to make sure the American people have the information in front of them to make the right decision, or just make a decision, you know, and not try to influence the decision, but here's everything we know about this person or this cause or this issue, please take time to read it or view it or, you know, absorb it in some way and then act on it. And that's the essence of our country. So, you know, both the senator and the chairman made reference to all the marvelous memorials that we have here in this city. Now, almost every one of them is either about defending free speech or is because a free press existed so that somebody could make the case that this country needed to do something, that we needed to deal with slavery, or that we needed to deal with civil rights. All of those things all relate back to freedom of expression. All of those things depended on individual journalists running risks, social risks sometimes, physical risks sometimes, certainly the risk of retaliation. So when Chairman Dreyer, David Dreyer, called me about this and said, hey, I'd like you to be involved in this, kind of a no-brainer to say I'd love to do it. And then when he told me the other people he'd already lined up that were part of it, I thought, gosh, those are the kinds of people you'd want to be associated with in any common endeavor. And it's exactly the right way to do this in the bipartisan way. Now, I've never thought of the press as the enemy of the people, but probably is the enemy of politicians. The fact that we know how essential the media is, and we can come together and we can say this is a really important thing for the country to reflect upon. These are really important sacrifices that need to be recognized and that we need to honor, I think is probably the ultimate compliment of politicians back to the press. Just as I think when we get covered, we get complimented because you get noticed, you get a chance to make your case, make your argument. So great pleasure to be here, to be part of this. I look forward to working with our good friends, Congresswoman Napolitano, obviously Rob Portman, and my good friend Senator Cardin, and see if we can get this across the aisle. Hopefully in a time when we're not doing very much together in Washington, D.C., we can stop and honor the institution that allows us to exist at all and get this done together. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Let me just say thanks to my former colleagues. I spent a third of a century representing California in the Congress, and people ask me what you miss, And often there are a lot of people I don't miss, but I will say the two behind me are two who I do miss. And their work is about to begin because, again, this needs to be very bipartisan. We're hoping to see this move as expeditiously as possible. We want to get this to the president's desk for signature. And at that point, we begin the 7-year process. The 7-year process. Ralph Waldo Emerson famously talked about it all being in the journey. We've got a 7-year journey ahead of us. And so with that, I would like to call on my good friend, whom I've already talked about, Don Graham. Don?
As reporters, I expect all of you to ask Congressman Dreyer who it is that he does not miss. I want to thank Chairman Dreyer, and I want to thank Congressman Cole and Senator Cardin, who are, of course, here violating a law in Washington which forbids Democrats and Republicans from acting together on an occasion like this. Before I begin my own remarks, I want to introduce one member of the committee building this memorial, to whom I happen to be married. But I want to introduce Amanda Bennett because she is the director of the Voice of America, a journalistic organization headquartered in Washington. If we list on a fallen journalist memorial the names of all journalists killed in the line of duty, there will be more from Voice of America than from almost any other newspaper in the United States, with the possible exception of the Annapolis Capital Gazette. 50 years ago, 51 years ago, as an American soldier in Vietnam, I met and knew pretty well 3 journalists who died in the course of covering that war. Francois Sully of Newsweek, Larry Burroughs of Life, and Dana Stone of UPI. Whenever my friends come from out of town and I want to show them Washington, I walk down the mall. And we usually go to one of the most moving places on the mall, for me, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, where the names of all the 50,000 Americans who died in combat are engraved on the wall. Those 3 names are not, nor are the names of the dozens of other reporters who died reporting and taking pictures in the same war. Other journalists, Michael Kelly, the editor of The Atlantic, a columnist for the Washington Post, and many more, died in the war in Iraq. And then Danny Pearl of the Wall Street Journal and others in the war in Afghanistan. I'm a former publisher. There won't be any publishers' names on this memorial. It is reporters, and it is photographers, especially those who, as the point of their career, go to the riskiest places in the world, who risk their lives. As someone who used to work for the Washington Post, I point out that we meet in the shadow of the death of Jamal Khashoggi, a columnist for the Washington Post, murdered brutally, intentionally, as an act of a state, because he wrote what he believed. Those are the risks that reporters and writers run at their worst. We who spend our lives, or in my case, spent much of my life, caring about telling the news, know that journalism is not standing up on cable TV and shouting at the top of your lungs. Maybe that's a part of journalism now. The most difficult part of journalism is reporting, is finding the truth. And the most difficult part of all that is finding the truth where danger lies. I am honored to be part of David Dreyer's effort, and it is his effort to establish this memorial, and we will all do what we can to see that it comes about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Don, and thank you, Amanda, for everything that you have done and continue to do. And here is my colleague we were just talking about earlier, Rob Portman, and he is just yesterday, along with Ben Cardin, introduced S3465, which I never used the numbers before, but we will use that, and we're hoping that maybe by unanimous consent or some very, very easy process, we can get this through so that we'll begin what will be a 7-year journey. It takes on average 7 years for these memorials to be built, Rob. So we've been singing your praises. I'm sure your ears have been burning, and I can't thank you enough for doing this. And so we want to encourage the United States Senate to absolutely confirm the 2 judicial nominees that Rob just introduced. He left that hearing to come down here to be with us. So the great Rob Portman.
David, thank you. Everything has been said, but not everybody has said it. So I'm sure I'm not going to add much more to the articulate comments that David Dreyer already made. David is a dear friend, and when he called me, told me about his project, of course I was interested, and I just had the opportunity to speak with Ben Cardin on his way out. Ben and I are dear friends, and I'm looking forward to joining with him on this. It's a noble effort. The commitment to finding the truth, to informing the public, and to safeguarding our democracy is what journalism is ultimately about. And I believe that a free and open press is absolutely essential to our democracy. And so it's about paying tribute to those who have fallen. It's also about those principles. And I'm pleased that we have a bipartisan and a bicameral approach to this. I don't think it'll be a partisan issue. I hope it won't. I'm glad that Barbara Cochran has agreed to step up and help in this. We're going to need to raise some money because there is no federal money going into this project, which I think is appropriate, frankly. But it does mean that we've got to rely on some of our friends in the private sector and others to step up. It's the first anniversary of the terrible tragedy in Annapolis, and I know this is very personal to a lot of you whose lives have intersected with the journalists and employees at the Capitol Gazette. And I understand that some family members are here, and to them and to the families of others who were killed that day, we of course grieve with you, and this memorial wouldn't have gotten underway without that terrible tragedy. So this is a way to take some of our grief and sorrow and channel it into something constructive. We do hope that the men and women who work every day to bring news to our communities are going to be strongly supportive of this as well, and I think that won't be an issue. And we'll be talking to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle so that we can, as David Dreyer has said, get it done very quickly. We believe that this is an appropriate memorial, again, not just to those who lost their lives a year ago, but to the hundreds. In fact, I've told 1,300 journalists since 1992 alone have been killed in the line of duty, doing their job. Targeted simply for doing their job. And here in this country, of course, upholding our First Amendment rights. So again, thank you, David, for including me and bringing this to my attention, and we look forward to working alongside all of you to get this done.
Thanks a lot, Rob. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator. And again, Rob's presence here underscores the very, very strong bipartisan commitment to this effort. I should add, thanks, it's good to see you, Rob. I will add that in the House of Representatives, Congresswoman Grace Napolitano is the lead House author. She's the second-ranking member of the Committee of Jurisdiction there, and so we look forward to working with her as we move to try and get this done just as quickly as possible. So we've mentioned Barbara Cochran on several occasions already, and she reminded me, she looked it up, I called her about 5 weeks ago and asked her if she would take on this responsibility along with her colleague Julie Moose, and she basically said I didn't give her much of a choice, but she enthusiastically embraced this notion. Her husband, John Cochran, who's here as well, is a veteran of NBC and ABC, and Barbara herself has had a very storied career in journalism, having been Vice President, Bureau Chief for CBS, Executive Producer for Meet the Press. She began at the Washington Star. You knew that, Don, very well. And And today she's the Hurley Professor at the University of Missouri, my original home state. I'm a Show-Me Stater, School of Journalism. And so with that, the president of the Fallen Journalists Memorial Foundation, Barbara Cochran.
As you can see, Mr. Dreyer is a hard man to say no to. So grateful to Senator Cardin, Congressman Cole, Senator Portman from my home state of Ohio, and to Congresswoman Napolitano for their leadership on this bill. It is so refreshing to see a bipartisan effort and to hear the kind words from people in public office and the understanding of what the role of journalists is in our society. It's very, very heartening to have that kind of support. Also, I want to say a big thank you to those who have agreed to serve on our Board of Advisors, beginning with Don Graham, Amanda Bennett, Clarence Page, Allison Kojak, the president of the National Press Club, and do I see any others in the room at the moment? But thank you so much for agreeing to do this and for being here today as a show of support. We really appreciate that. We have to date 25 members of our Board of Advisors. It's too long a list to read, but you can read it for yourself at fallenjournalist.org. And that was fallenjournalist.org. Yeah, thank you very much. And when you do take a look, you will see that there's a great diversity of types of media and viewpoints, as well as the other kinds of diversity that are so important. And we hope to continue that as we build the support for the organization. The National Press Club Journalism Institute is so proud to be hosting this effort. The boards of both the club, which represents the press club members, and the Institute, which serves as the nonprofit educational affiliate of the press club, have endorsed this plan enthusiastically. And we're just very happy to have this under our roof, literally. The memorial fits perfectly with the mission of both the club and the Institute to uphold press freedom both here at home and internationally. And we're also think it's very appropriate that this is being announced in a week when we're very mindful of our friends and colleagues at the Capitol Gazette, for whom, as Senator Cardin said, this is a very tough week at the end of a very tough year. We are remembering them, and this memorial will, of course, honor their memory and that of other fallen journalists, both American and international. I'm so honored to be involved in this project, and I look forward to the day when the memorial has been built and is there as a reminder to all who come to Washington of the tremendous sacrifice made by those who lost their lives in pursuit of truth. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and I just want to say what a privilege and honor it's going to be in the coming years to be able to work so closely with you and Julie and others to make this happen. Everyone has talked about the fact that private dollars are going to be what it'll take to build this, and it will take many, many, many millions of dollars to make it happen. And I just like to, at the outset, express appreciation to both the Annenberg Foundation and the Michael and Jackie Farrow Foundations, as they have come forward to provide with the initial seed money. And I also am happy, having gotten the report from Julie, that since we have put the fallenjournalists.org site up, just in the last couple or 3 days, we have received thousands of dollars in contributions. So we've got a good start, but we have found that it will again take tens of millions of dollars. Barbara has just mentioned, and everyone has mentioned, that it was the tragedy of June 28th, 2018 at the Capitol Gazette that inspired this effort that we are launching today. And Rick Hutsul is the editor of the Capital Gazette. Many of you had the chance to interact with him. On Saturday, I read the accounts from his colleagues as they're looking, and the biggest question that is asked of me regularly is, how are the people at the Capital Gazette doing? It was pointed out by Ben Cardin that the day after the shooting, imagine in this newsroom, the day after the shooting, the Capital Gazette came out and was printed. And that was a monumental achievement, and it was done in large part due to the stellar leadership of Rick Hutsul. So I'd like to call on Rick.
It's a great honor to be here. It's a privilege to be invited to help in this effort. I am still and have always been a small town newspaper editor. However, I am intimately aware of the dangers that journalists faced, because in 1860, the editor of the Annapolis Gazette endorsed Abraham Lincoln. Angry readers burned his house down.
Wow.
Journalism is and always has been a dangerous profession. Journalists run toward danger to cover it, not away from it. Annapolis and Anne Arundel County have started work on a press freedom memorial. The city has donated space. Anne Arundel County yesterday agreed to help provide funding for it. And if Annapolis can do this, Washington can do the same. It's been mentioned, people have asked how we're doing this week. It's difficult. Rob and Wendy and Gerald and John and Rebecca are not there. On Thursday, a reporter who survived the attack will return to the Naval Academy to finish her assignment. She covered Induction Day on June 28th, 2018, and went back to the office for lunch and didn't get back to the Naval Academy. She did, however, survive, and on Thursday she'll go and she'll watch the new class coming into the Naval Academy take the oath of office. Journalists finish their assignments. I don't know what I can contribute to this, but I find it a noble and great honor. Journalism is vital to the success of our democracy. I know it at the local level. Some of you know it at the national level. And I think a memorial like this is a just and fitting way to recognize that importance to our nation. So thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Day after tomorrow in Annapolis, we're looking forward to an event that will be held marking the anniversary. We'll have a moment of silence at 2:33 Friday afternoon, which is when this took place last year. And I will be conveying to all of them the fact that from this tragedy has come what will ultimately become a great memorial in our nation's capital. So with that, I would like to take any questions that any of you all have of me, and to express appreciation to everyone for being here, and thanks for all of the support. So if there are any questions that you all would have. I've underscored the imperative. Thanks so much again, Amanda. Really, really appreciate your being here and all your help. We do not want politics involved in this. Obviously, politics are involved in everything, but we want to depoliticize this as much as we possibly can. And again, we are hoping that we'll see this great team work with Republicans and Democrats to get this passed through so that we can really begin our work once we have the authorization from the United States Congress. Yes?
The museum has a journalist memorial which has like the ashes of Larry Burroughs at it. And the museum, of course, is closing at the end of the year. Do you know if this will somehow incorporate that or how this will work?
It's a very good question. Thank you for that. Actually, the closure of the museum played a role in inspiring this effort as well. Jan Newharth, who is leading the museum, is a member of our Board of Advisors, and on June 3rd, Rick and Triff and I were at the museum as the names of our colleagues were inscribed on the wall there. But we do know the museum is closing, and that building is going to be turned over to Johns Hopkins. And its absence, again, played a role in encouraging us to move ahead with this. And so we're working closely with those who have been at the museum, and obviously there are many people who obviously as journalists have worked there. So we'll be working with them as we proceed with this effort. Yes, sir.
You said you wanted to depoliticize this as much as possible, but you're making the push during the tenure of a president who calls the president of the people. Do you think that's even possible?
Yes, I do think it's possible. 1 year ago, when we had the shootings take place at the Capitol Gazette, the president said that no American, including journalists, should go to work and face the threat of violence. And we appreciate those words of encouragement that came from him at that time. And I will say that I've already had meetings and discussions. In fact, later today we'll be having meetings at the White House, and we want to, again, build support all the way across the spectrum. If you look at our Board of Advisors, we have people from the left, right, in between. And so, again, when I say our quest to depoliticize this as much as possible, it is due to the fact that the idea of recognizing that the keepers of democracy are journalists, and those who pay the ultimate price should be honored, is what this is all about, and it knows no political party at all. Yes? Thank you for serving on our Board of Advisors, too.
Thank you for inviting me. Are other members of Congress who didn't here today co-sponsoring?
That's a great question. And yes, there are many other members. We basically, in drafting the legislation, wanted to, and again, the legislation simply authorizes the foundation to begin the process itself of work, and then the memorial itself will take place later. But the bills were introduced with a number of co-sponsors, both Democrats and Republicans, and we want to build it from both parties. I mean, the H.R. 1969, I think, had 16 or 18 co-sponsors, and NS 3465, I know that Senator Van Hollen, also from Maryland, joined, and in the House, I understand that Annapolis falls within the congressional district of my former colleague, John Sarbanes, and I think he's an original co-sponsor. And so, again, the idea of building support from both political parties is going to be a priority, and it's already underway. And I hope that my three former colleagues who've just left will go back and immediately begin talking this up amongst members of both the House and Senate. Yes, Mr. Hoagland, thank you very much for coming from the Bipartisan Policy Center. Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, Bill, and thanks for it. I mean, it depends. Not everyone likes everything to be gold-plated. Maybe I shouldn't have said that, but it depends on what the piece of property is. It depends on what the committee that is formed, and again, we're just at the beginning of this process, comes up with. It depends on the size of it. These are all unanswered questions, but I think suffice it to say it'll be many, many millions of dollars, which is what I've been instructed to say here by staff so far. And so and how many that is remains to be seen. But based on sort of the early numbers I've seen, I think it'll be upwards beyond $10 million for the process to begin. And I do, again, express appreciation to those who have come forward and are immediately providing this. And as I said, 8 weeks ago, Bill, this was little more than an idea, and we've been able to get this far this quickly. And when I called Wallace Annenberg, the first thing that she said is photojournalists. And I've talked to David Hume Kennerly, the famous Pulitzer Prize-winning photographer. He wants to put together a journalists committee. Barbara and I were just talking earlier, and we're going to look at a wide range of journalists from the different fields. Obviously, new media is going to be involved in this as well. We've brought together lots and lots of veteran journalists, if you look at the makeup of our Board of Advisors now. And so I can see us putting together several different groups, and then from that, we obviously are going to hope that we'll see many people play a role in raising the resources that'll be necessary. But again, the moment this passes the Congress and is signed by the President, it begins a 7-year process, which is what is anticipated. We have to go through the Monuments Commission and all. So it's going to be a challenge, and it all falls on Barbara Cochran's shoulders. So. Thank you all very, very much for being here. Thanks for your support, and remember everyone at the Capitol Gazette day after tomorrow. Thank you.